He mocked a homeless biker. What happened next left everyone speechless. The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it hangs in the air, a cold gray mist that seeps into your bones. It was on one of these dreary Tuesday afternoons that the story unfolded at the Rusty Spoon, a bustling diner known for its cheap coffee and even cheaper gossip. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and chaotic. Waitresses balanced towering stacks of pancakes, and the smell of frying bacon fought against the damp chill drifting in from the street. Sitting in a corner booth, surrounded by his entourage of sycophantic friends, was Julian. Julian was the kind of young man who measured his worth by the logo on his shirt and the volume of his laugh. Dressed in an expensive designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, he felt invincible. He was loud, arrogant, and currently bored. That boredom ended the moment the diner door creaked open. A gust of wind swept through the room, carrying with it a figure that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. He was a biker, or at least he wore the remnants of what once might have been leather gear. His jacket was cracked and faded, patched together with duct tape and desperation. His boots were scuffed beyond recognition, and a thick matted beard obscured most of his face. He smelled of wet dog, old oil, and the street. This was Silas. Silas didn't look up as he shuffled toward the counter. He kept his eyes fixed on the linoleum floor, clutching a few crumpled dollar bills in a trembling hand. He just wanted a cup of hot soup and maybe a slice of day-old bread. But Julian couldn't let silence lie. As Silas passed their booth, Julian stuck out his leg, not enough to trip the man, but enough to make him stumble. The diner went quiet for a split second. "Watch where you're going, trash," Julian sneered, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. He laughed, looking back at his friends for approval. "Did you get lost on your way to the dumpster, or are you just trying to scare away customers with that smell?" His friends chuckled nervously, emboldened by Julian's cruelty. Silas paused, gripping the edge of a nearby table to steady himself. He slowly turned his head. His eyes, visible through the tangle of hair, weren't angry. They were tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. "I'm sorry," Silas rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "I'll be quick." "You'll be quick getting out," Julian shot back, standing up now, enjoying the stage. "Seriously, does anyone here think we should serve him? Look at those hands, probably stolen. Hey, buddy, did you steal that jacket, or did you find it in a gutter?" The mockery escalated. Julian mimicked Silas's shuffle, doing an exaggerated caricature of a homeless man, drawing laughter from a few patrons who were too afraid or too amused to intervene. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Martha, looked distressed but hesitated, fearing losing her job if she confronted a regular like Julian. Silas said nothing. He simply lowered his head again, walked to the counter, ordered the smallest item on the menu, a cup of black coffee, and sat at the farthest table, shrinking into himself as if trying to disappear. Julian, unsatisfied that his target hadn't fought back, decided to finish the job. He grabbed a sugar packet, walked over to Silas's table, and dumped the entire contents into the old man's lap. "There," Julian laughed loudly, "now you match the decor. Sweet and worthless." The diner fell silent. Even Julian's friends stopped laughing. The cruelty had crossed a line from teasing to something darker. Everyone waited for Silas to explode, to yell, to throw the coffee back. Instead, Silas slowly reached into his inner pocket. He pulled out a small, worn leather wallet. It looked ancient, the stitching frayed. With deliberate, gentle movements, he opened it. He didn't pull out money. He pulled out a photograph. He placed the photo on the table, smoothing it out with a dirty thumb. Then he looked up at Julian. For the first time, there was a shift in Silas's expression. The exhaustion remained, but beneath it lay a terrifying clarity. "You remind me of someone," Silas said softly. His voice wasn't shaky anymore. It carried a weight that silenced the entire room. "You remind me of my son." Julian rolled his eyes, ready with another quip, but the words died in his throat. "My son was exactly like you," Silas continued, his gaze locking onto Julian's. "Arrogant, rich, thought the world owed him everything because his father built an empire. He mocked people too. He thought kindness was for the weak." Silas took a breath, the air hitching in his chest. 20 years ago, he drove his car off a cliff while running from the police after a night of partying. He died alone, screaming for help that never came. I spent every penny I had looking for him, searching every morgue, every hospital. I lost my business, my wife, my home, and now I ride. I ride to find pieces of him in strangers, hoping one day I'll see him change before it's too late. The room was so quiet you could hear the rain hitting the window pane. Julian stood frozen, the color draining from his face. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. "But today," Silas whispered, tears finally cutting tracks through the grime on his cheeks, "today, I don't see my son. I just see a boy who is already lost." Silas stood up. He didn't take his coffee. He picked up the photograph, kissed it gently, and tucked it back into his wallet. Then he reached into his pocket again and pulled out a single, crisp $100 bill. He placed it on the table next to Martha, the waitress. "For the trouble, and for the boy in the suit. Buy him a meal. He looks hungry for something real." With that, Silas turned and walked out into the rain, disappearing into the gray mist as quickly as he had arrived. For a long minute, no one moved. Julian stared at the empty doorway, then down at the $100. The laughter of his friends felt like a distant memory, replaced by a suffocating shame. He slumped back into his chair, the expensive suit suddenly feeling heavy and constricting. The image of the old man's eyes, filled with a grief so vast it could swallow oceans, burned itself into his mind. He realized, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, that he hadn't mocked a homeless man. He had mocked a father who had lost everything, a man who still chose to give when he had nothing left. Julian buried his face in his hands. For the first time in his life, the wealthy, untouchable Julian broke down and sobbed right there in the middle of the diner, while the rain continued to wash the streets clean outside. The story of what happened at the Rusty Spoon spread through the town within hours. No one knew where Silas went, and no one ever saw him again. But the lesson he left behind lingered. People started treating the homeless with a new level of respect. And Julian? He changed. He sold the flashy cars, quit the job he hated, and started volunteering at the very shelter where he once would have refused to set foot. Sometimes, the people we look down upon are the ones holding us up, and sometimes a simple act of cruelty reveals the deepest tragedy of all, that the mocker is often the one who is truly broken. Thanks for watching.